take the magic sauce.
Make sure it follows you walk around.
Yeah?
It will.
Does it?
That's the whole
Okay, there we go. So my name is Ski Kucherilski. I'm from the North Shore School District, and we're going to talk about DevOps for school districts. And actually for anything that's not a group that has a developer component. So it's not just for school districts, it's for any company that doesn't have a lot of developers. I've been doing this for a while. I've been at North Shore for about 13, 14 years now. I'm also a director in the League of Professional System Admins. If you're interested in that, you can talk to me afterwards, and feel free to contact me. So during this session, I'm first going to define what DevOps is and how it can help you out at your job. Then I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the actual ways it can help you out. So I'll give you a lot of examples from what I've done and from companies that I've worked at in the past. So first, I'm wondering, does anybody here have a definition of DevOps that they'd be willing to share? Yeah?
The virgin of programming and system administration.
Okay, that's a good way. Is it a technology?
No, it's just a methodology.
Yeah, it's more of a culture change than anything else. So it's not so much technology. There are certain technologies that do support DevOps, but DevOps in itself is really a culture change. Yeah? I heard somebody else. Okay. So this is Gartner's definition of DevOps. This pretty thing, it represents a change in IT culture, focusing on IT service delivery, or rapid service delivery, through adoption of lean practices, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing we're going to do is try to parse this thing out, because it's rather dense. So again, it's primarily a culture change in IT. A lot of IT is like developers write something, they throw it over the wall, operations have to make it work. How many of you have ever had to install a package that's got a lot of bugs in it, right? You've had to install software that's buggy as all hell, and you have to figure out some way to make it work. Typically with minimal, if any, documentation. That's not DevOps. DevOps is trying to stop that from happening. That's one of their big goals. It's really focused on people and how they interact more than anything else. If you go to a DevOps conference, if you get a chance, go to one of the Devops Days conferences. They're all over the world now. They're a lot of fun to go to, and it's almost like going to something where like a bunch of gurus get together and they talk about these kind of amorphous, hey, I have feelings and things like that, because that's what makes it work. Rapid IT service delivery. So people know now that things change very rapidly. Google pushes out multiple updates a day. Facebook once a day. GitHub multiple times a day. How are they able to do that, right? It used to be you would get a piece of software and you would get an update once a year. Now they're doing it daily, hourly in some cases. They do that through this adoption of what they call agile or lean practices. These started out in the software world where they had the waterfall software development model that failed miserably, so they adopted these different software development modules, and they work really well. Now they're trying to push them into IT operations. Because of this, they can scale up. They can handle tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of machines with not that many users. A little side note on this, how many people use Office 365? Okay, you guys are doing really well. I would let you know that be a little bit cautious about putting all your data up there right now for another couple years. I happen to know the chief SRE for Office 365, and they're about 3 to 4 years behind Google in their systems. 2 years ago, they actually had system admins doing everything, not a whole lot of automation. They are fixing that. They're working really hard to fix that because system admins don't scale up very well when you have 1 million computers to manage. And finally, a system-oriented approach. The big thing about DevOps is they don't just look at operations or HR or business services. They try to look at the bigger picture. If your school district is at anything like North Shore School District, every department locally optimizes their work for their department, which means it's not optimized for the process they're trying to do. And we'll talk about the onboarding or hiring process. That's a real classic one. Because it's not optimized for the big process, you're wasting energy. You're wasting space. You're not getting from point A to point B as fast as you can do it. So a big goal of DevOps is to eliminate those silos. Not just the ones between dev and operations, but any silo within the company. We don't want people to be tossing things over the wall to some other group and say, here, it's your problem now. That's the whole goal behind DevOps. Eliminate those silos. Get rid of them. Okay, so what are some of the problems? A big problem that it solves is the fear of change. Because of the culture change, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, a lot of school districts, a lot of organizations in general, it's scary to make a big change to your systems. Is it still going to work? You migrate everybody to a new mail server. How many things are going to break, right? You upgrade that mail server. How many things are going to break, right? Is it going to break the superintendent stuff? And then you're going to get really yelled at. So most of us tend not to like change. But that's really hard in today's society. Everything's changing very rapidly. DevOps addresses that head on. Risky deployments. I'm going to go spend 100 grand on this new toy and I'm going to deploy it and I really hope it works right. So speaking of that, I've gotten a little bit burned by that recently. We went out and bought a piece of software called Device 42 to collect a lot of information and show us all the dependencies within all our systems. This system depends upon that system. So I can like look at a system and immediately know if I take that one down, these are the things that are going to break. And we checked it out. We spent over a month with a demo version of it checking it out, and it all seemed to work fine. And then when we start putting it in production, we're finding all kinds of edge cases where it doesn't work fine. It would have been really nice if I could have done it a little bit more incrementally, not spend all the money up front. This is another one. If you have any developers at all, or QA, you'll run into that one. Like, hey, it works on my machine. Why isn't it working on yours? It's got to be a problem with your machine, right? And then finally, a lot of functionally separate groups. I'll be talking a lot about that. We're trying to break down those silos. And that is really, really, really hard. Humans, by their nature, want to belong to a group. And it becomes us versus that other group over there, them. So we always try to make them the problem. It's hardwired into us, no matter how much we fight against it. You can see it in our political culture. You can see it inside your own organization. And even if you have two people in two different groups trying to break down those barriers, it still gets to be hard. And I'll give you some examples of that later on that I've been running into. So a short timeline of DevOps. It basically started by this guy named Patrick Dubois. He's a consultant over in Belgium or the Netherlands. And he was stuck with trying to do a large migration of a big data center. And he had the problem. The dev and the operation folks were not working with each other. And he was a project manager. And he kept fighting them both, trying to get them to work together. And he said, this has got to be a better way. So he posted to Twitter and said, help. And some people say, hey, we got the same problem. And before you know it, they formed a little conference called Devops Days. It is the only conference that I know of that is basically Twitter-based. If you look at all the DevOps stuff, almost all the information comes out on Twitter. Doesn't come out via email, doesn't come out via, they're finally starting to get some books out and stuff. But by 2009, you had the first Devops Days. And then in 2010 and 11, people started really pushing it, and you started getting more books out. Gene Kim, has anybody read The Phoenix Project? One. I encourage you all to go home, buy that book. It's a novel that talks about DevOps, and more than anything else, even me speaking up here, it's going to explain exactly what it can do for your organization. And again, it's really focused on devs and ops, but just replace dev with HR and keep the ops the same, or replace it with some other department that you're having problems with that won't make a change that'll make your life easier. And then read through the book. Extremely good book.
And it's a really light read.
Yeah, it's a light read. You can go through it in a couple hours, but it's a lot of fun, a really, really good book. And these days, lots and lots of people do DevOps. Target, Nordstrom, they all do it because they see a huge benefit out of it. It enables them to respond to their customer base quicker, faster, and it makes their company a happier company. It's not so much departments fighting within the company. They're actually starting to kind of work in the same direction. So why would we want to do it? These are just a few of them. You can deploy software faster and easier. Increase collaboration. That's a really big one. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have HR work with you and come to you and say, what could we do to help you out to make your job easier? Remember, operations is at the end of almost any process in your organization. It always starts with business services, HR, whatever. We get the end. Because of that, if something's done wrong up there or doesn't work well up there, we have to try to fix it. Another big one is reduction in spending. I'm not wasting so much. I'm going to be saving a lot of money if I really do this. There's a report that Puppet Labs puts out every year. It's called the Status of Devops. From their 2016 report, they said that you can recover up to 24 times faster from failures. Wouldn't that be neat if something broke in your organization and you can recover it really quick, right? You'll have a 3-time lower failure change rate. And you'll have dramatically shorter lead time. Somebody wants something, it makes sense, you can get it to them quickly. A lot of DevOps is definitely applicable more at the size of a Google or Azure or something, but there are definitely the principles that we can use in our own organizations. A lot less unplanned work. Okay, so again, it's dev and DevOps, but most of us don't have devs, right? So you can do it without devs. I just replaced devs with some other business group. Because again, I'm talking about breaking down those barriers between two different groups. The concept of DevOps works just as well with HR, business services, whatever group that is your current pain point, stick them in there. And this should work with them. Anybody has any questions about what DevOps is and some of the benefits? Yeah.
Can you give us some real-world examples?
Yes, I'll be giving you some later on when I get into it. Any other questions? Okay. The nice thing about DevOps is it's actually relatively simple. So first we're going to talk about values and principles. So the concept behind values and principles, values are these general feelings, ideas that will drive an organization. You know, like being system admins, we all have a value of being ethical, right? In principle, what does that mean? That means there are certain things we don't do and we do, right? So we're going to talk about the values of DevOps first. Those are things you can't really measure very well. However, then we'll talk about the principles of DevOps. That's what I can measure. That's the part that you can go home and say, hey, yeah, I can do this. Ideally, your whole organization has to have this set of values, because if they don't, it's going to be really hard. You'll be fighting upstream a little bit. Once you get that set, then you put those two things together, you can come out with some practices that you can put together and use in your organization. So values are the core beliefs. The principles are actually how we implement those beliefs, I guess. So Damon Edwards, John Willis, and Jez Humble at the beginning of Devops Days in 2010 came up with these values for DevOps. These are the things. It's called CALMS. You can actually Google CALMS in DevOps, and you'll come up with a whole bunch of papers that all talk about this. So the first one is culture. There's a guy named Dr. Ron Restrom that's identified the cultures of an organization. And he basically has 3 of them that range from pathological, I'm going to blame the messenger and shoot them all the time, all the way up to a blameless type culture that doesn't shoot the messenger. He calls it a generative type culture, where anything that goes wrong is an opportunity to figure out what went wrong. And we're going to try to fix it, i.e., the people are not the problem, and they're not our enemy, but the problem is the enemy. Why did that go wrong? And we don't blame anybody. That's a big thing about DevOps. So DevOps really focuses on creating a blameless culture, one that does not hurt you, one where you can sit there and say, hey, this broke, one where you are the messenger. So that's a really big part of DevOps. And it's hard because, again, we're hardwired to say us and them, and we blame them. So the example I can give on that right now is I'm working out with our HR department to improve our onboarding employee process. And the gal up there named Megan, she's really wonderful, and she also believes in these concepts. But even when we talk to each other, we are really nervous about, I'm really nervous about asking her to make a little change that would help me out a lot. And she's really nervous about asking me to make the change. You watch our language. You know, it's like we're dancing around each other, really nervous, because we don't want to make them upset because of this historical background of the 2 departments fighting all the time. And we're really aware of that. So a lot of honesty, openness, communication. Can't have enough communication. Let people know what's going on. Change is considered good, not bad. This is all part of what you want to try to encourage. And you're not going to get all this immediately, right? Right now, Megan and I are trying to build up our trust. Maybe 2 years down the road, we'll have that trust where I can just go call her up and say, I need this done right now, and this is why, and she'll do it. I can't say that to her right now, though. I have to couch it in special language and stuff like that. It's kind of funny, actually. This idea of grassroots innovation. Somebody comes up with a great idea. Let's run with it. No more the NIMBY or back in, type syndrome that you'll see in a lot of places, right? So that's one of the first big ones. What else do I got on that one?
Could you talk a little bit about how you have accountability without a blame culture?
Oh, yeah. So number 1 is you don't blame the person, you blame the process or the event or something. So for example, that person that took down Amazon on the West Coast, on the East Coast several months ago, if you were to read Amazon's report, and it's online, that says this is what happened, they never blamed the person, did they? They blamed, oh, our process allowed this to happen. Humans will make mistakes, guaranteed. We're human. But we can design processes and we can design systems that will stop those mistakes or not allow us to make those mistakes. Now again, I'm sure there are places where a person is actively trying to bring a system down or actively trying to hurt something. But that is incredibly rare. Most of the time it's they fat-fingered a keyboard something, right? Which is what happened with Amazon. Or it actually happened, where was another one that happened? Stack Exchange also had something like that happen. Well, that I can fix. I can have the computer watch out for something. Hey, are you really sure you want to do that? I mean, just a simple, do a prompt like this is something I always complain to my Windows people about, is on Unix, I'm God. I type in rm-f, it deletes everything. I try to do that on Windows, it says, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you really sure? Right? It's 2 different approaches. So you do have a lot of accountability, but the accountability is more put into the process and the tools you provide the person. Yeah.
I have one that there was a receptionist at a school I worked for, and she'd been written up several times about not filing this paperwork and not filing this paperwork. And finally, we sat down and said, okay, well, why aren't you filing it? And she's like, well, I have to man the phones, and the filing cabinet is, 2 doors down, so I can't get over there during my normal work day. And she was staying late and trying to get it done. We moved the file cabinet over. It was never a problem again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's simple things like that, but the culture there was blaming her for not doing her job instead of trying to solve the process.
Exactly right. So that's a very good example. And this is what DevOps does, is the enemy is the problem or the process, it's not the person. And because one of the other aspects of DevOps we'll talk about is if you don't know what's going on, you can't fix anything, right? If you don't know something's broken, you can't fix it. If you have a culture that blames people, they aren't going to come up and tell you that something's broken or something's not working right or it's not optimized the best, which means you are, by definition, guaranteeing that your organization will not work at its optimum. If you have a blame-free culture where people are encouraged to come forward with ideas and saying, yeah, okay, I blew that one, then you're going to get all those new ideas. You will find out the sore points. You'll find out the problems in your organization, and you'll have a better chance at trying to fix them. Yeah?
Is part of the culture also that you, why communication is so important is because you can't know by yourself
Yeah.
those pieces.
Yeah, there's no way you can know by yourself.
If you think you do, you don't.
Yeah. So I also like to think about it. Everybody knows Thomas Edison, right? So one of the things that he would say is, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. DevOps is the same way. We're going to keep trying until we find the right way. And it's going to happen at way 8,999 or whatever that number is. But the faster you get there, you got to fail a lot to get there. And the faster you do those failures, the quicker you'll get there. And it's a whole different idea. We're having a little bit of discussion now with the superintendent in our district, who is more of the, I don't want anything to fail ever. And I have a hard time with that because that means I'm going to stack up something. I don't ever get a chance to find out what'll break and what won't. And when it does break, it's going to be a big owie because it's not going to take down one, it's going to take down a lot of stuff. I would much rather have a bunch of small failures that I can recover from and learn from.
He needs to review Google's business model, which is fail, but fail fast.
Yeah.
Over and over.
Concept of failing fast. You're exactly right. What do we got here? Go. Okay. Next thing in comms is automation. We're humans. We can't do things very fast. I'm limited to how fast I can click and how fast I can type. A computer can beat me any day of the week, right? So I want automation to enable those rapid feedback loops. I want automation to sit there and fix problems if possible. My ideal monitoring system would say, hey, I have a problem here, my disk is filling up, and then it would go off onto that machine and say, this is why it's filling up. Oh, I can fix that. And then just send me a little note saying, I fixed it. I'm not there yet. I actually have to get on the system like I did this morning, figure out why it was filling up, get rid of the bad files, fix the process that was causing the problem. But ideally, I want the computer to do that. So I can go off and do the more fun stuff. One thing that's curious about automation that DevOps has found out is it's totally dependent upon people. Unless you get 100% buy-in from the people, they're going to sabotage it. Guaranteed. So automation is always people first. You think about things that you can automate that will reduce the load on the people to get them to buy into it. We've had a lot of problems in our school district about trying to automate little things, and the people don't buy into it, and it dies. Right now with the HR system, we are trying to do some automation, and we're selling it to them as we're going to have one less form for them to fill out. I'm hoping that will work. We'll find out. The idea of lean comes from Toyota manufacturing. It's the concept of you only need what you need at that point in time. So I'm going to get rid of all my waste because waste is dollars that I'm not using to get to my goal. So instead of taking that long path to get from A to B, I want to just go A to B, is a concept here. So DevOps focuses on getting rid of things that don't get you toward your end goal. So for example, again back to the HR process, I want to bring on a new employee and get them all the services they need and trained up so they can be productive. I don't want to have to fill out extra forms. I don't want the employee to sit there waiting for things to show up on their doorstep. I don't want them to say, well, how do I have to use email or go talk to the teacher down the hall to figure out how to work their services? I want that all there right from the get-go, right? Because every time they're sitting there wandering around trying to figure out how to do something is time that they're not actually doing what they should be doing, preparing for class, teaching their students.
Does it also go the reverse way, like for the manufacturer, there's no need to have things stockpiled?
Yeah, just in time, right?
Yeah, you need, it's like just in time learning.
Yeah.
They go there to teach something what they need when they're going to need it.
Yep.
not in advance.
Exactly right. Metrics. This is Gartner's metrics pyramid. Again, some of these things do apply to us. Responsiveness to change, motivation, collaboration, sharing, user satisfaction. How many people here actually do user satisfactions of their teachers and stuff? Great. I wish we would do that.
It's not a great feeling.
You know, you can't get on Google or any online service without getting a survey popped up, right? And they're doing that because they know if they do that, it pays off. Like, I complained about Device 42 a little bit earlier. One thing I will give them credit for is that when I complained in one of their surveys about some of their products, about some of their aspects of the product, I got a call from the CTO saying, are you sure about that? And I said, yeah, here, I'll show it to you. And he said, boy, you're right, that's a piece of crap. And they are in the process of fixing that one little bit of their product that is a piece of crap.
I know we used to have a survey tool that just would never get used, and then it was replaced with a new Microsoft Forms-based survey tool recently. And ultimately, one of the questions was asked was, what was wrong with the old tool? Or, why weren't you filling out the surveys? And I told them the survey tool is terrible. But we never filled out the survey to tell you the tool is terrible. But now that it's good, we'll use it. So it was pretty interesting cyclical kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
So,
can judge how we're doing by how many days of the week we get like homemade brownies and stuff to our department. Teachers and thank you cards written by kindergartners.
yeah, that's a good way of doing
That goes
it.
2 ways because I used to get it just so that they would help me.
Oh.
So.
But that can lead to doing something to make them need you because
It led to this.
You had something back there?
Oh, every once in a while we just send out a Google form to survey our teachers, and we ask them about things, but we always give them options. That text box at the bottom where they can just give a response with, what are other IT concerns that you have at this time that you'd like to see addressed. And the first couple times we did it, we got some feedback that was kind of hard to swallow, but like over time, really, I think that it made the process better because
It does.
when you know that people have a perception of you, you can change.
That's right. Again, if you have that information, and yes, sometimes it can be hard to swallow. And when you do a survey, both do the quantitative type things, like response times, but also do the qualitative type things, like how is the IT person when he shows up on your doorstep, stuff like that. It really does help find out a lot about how they perceive you. And if you don't know how they perceive you, you're in trouble.
I will say the biggest thing that we really discovered from there is just the amount of miscommunication that happens because people will have ideas about things that just aren't founded in reality or fact, and it gives you that opportunity where you can go and have a discussion with them and bring them around to your side.
Well, or at least explain your side to them.
So that, well, I I mean, just like in cases when like someone thinks that you're being obstructive,
Hmm.
and then you can go there and be like, look, you know, it's not us that says you can't do this.
Yeah.
We literally can't do this.
It's reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. So an example of going overboard on metrics, everybody here knows Etsy, right? The little craft site. They collect 250,000 metrics, different time series metrics per day. And they collect them like about a 5 or a 1 minute interval, depending on the time series. Now that's just, to me, that's going really overboard. But all these companies are collecting an incredible amount of data and metrics about you, and you can do the same thing. You don't have to do it at that level, but send out the survey now and then. Find out what people think about you. When you do implement something new, wait a week, send out a survey. Find out, is it better, is it worse? And then the people that respond, whether it's good or bad, do something for them. Encourage those responses, right? Okay. Sharing is the idea of getting rid of those silos. I don't want separate groups. I want one group. I want an organization that's all going in the same direction as much as possible. And again, this is really hard. This is probably going to be the hardest thing you're going to fight. There will be times, North Shore for example, we have times where we've argued and we've done everything we can, and we say, okay, we just have to wait till that person retires. And literally, that's what it is. That's one reason why we can work with HR now, because a couple people retired last year. I'll be honest. And as long as they were there, nothing was ever going to change. And we tried and we tried. Now we have some new people there who are much more open to ideas of like, hey, if you make this little tiny change here, it's going to make our work, it'll save us an hour or two a day down at our end. And that's good for the school district, right? So you will run into cases where, unfortunately, you're stuck, unless the senior management says, hey, we really want to implement this, which I don't really see happening.
We had an example of that in a different situation. It was actually came from bargaining. I was bargaining for classified employees and with the district, and they really needed to change how the guaranteed response time on errors in payment. It wasn't that you weren't going to get there to correct them, but they wanted to have a very short window because, which we had no idea, their system was completely tied up, financial system, every time they had to correct an error.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was locked out of it, literally.
Oh, wow.
So for them, it was a really big thing. For us,
Yeah, it's easy.
so you have to report your error within 3 days, or you have to wait till the next paycheck. That wasn't that big a deal, but yeah, we had no idea it was such a big thing.
Yeah, you don't. And that goes back to the communication. If people don't feel free to say, hey, what you're doing, I know you might have a good reason for doing it, but that's hurting me. And that's hurting the organization. So let's see if we can't change it. Talk about that later. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go through the principles. This is the area that you guys can really take home and work with your groups on. So there are what I call the 3 principles. There's the 3 ways, small batches and minimum viable product. The last one probably doesn't apply to you a whole lot, but the first 2 definitely do. So the first one, the 3 ways. This was started by Gene Kim, who wrote the Phoenix Project. He came up with these as a way, because people had come up with the idea of calms, but when you go out into a large developer operation thing and you talk about fuzzy things like culture and automation and stuff, that you can't do that. You need something that you can really look at, that you can say, are you doing this? You need something that you can measure, basically, and say, are we making any progress? So Gene came up with, these are 3 things that I can do and I can actually measure. I can measure if we're making any progress along these typical axes. So the first one, system thinking. It's a process. Your system thinking can be stinks. Everybody's in their own local silo optimizing for their thing and they're hurting everybody else. Or you can go all the way over to the other side where it's really incredible. Everybody is really aware and talking to all the other departments, so if they make a change, they know how it's going to impact all the other departments. and they're optimizing for the entire process, whether it be delivering software, whether it be onboarding an employee or whatever. Amplify feedback loops. You can have no feedback loops. I get no feedback from my users. Nothing, right? Or you can have really good feedback loops, really comprehensive feedback loops. Now, everybody is somewhere along these axes. And you can think about your organization, and are you here? Are you over there? Somewhere in the middle. And then finally, continuous experimentation. North Shore's over here. Our superintendent doesn't like us to do that. So we're stuck over here. I would really like to scoot that one that way. System thinking, I think we're somewhere in here. We're just beginning to get rid of some of the people that are really blocking us from breaking down those silos. Feedback loops, yeah, we're somewhere over here too. But we're working on it. Okay, so I'm going to use this idea of employee onboarding. This is the concept of hiring, picking out who you're going to hire, and then all the way to that point where that employee is now productively doing stuff for your organization. That whole big process. School districts go through that a lot, right? North Shore, we hire 400 or 500 new people. We have pretty high turnover. We got 3,500 staff, and we're bringing on probably 300, 10, 15% new every year. So this eats up a chunk of our time, right? So our current process is pretty much ad hoc, improvised, and broken. It's optimized for every individual group. Payroll is optimized for their stuff. For example, in payroll, they don't actually even enter a new employee into the system until it's a few days before they have to be paid, which means you can get hired and not show up in payroll until 6 weeks later. Am I not supposed to give them an account for 6 weeks? I don't think so, right? HR has their little optimized process. We have our optimized process kind of at the end of it. It's really busted. Communication. We're not given IT, we literally don't know who works for the school district. We don't know when they leave. We have some vague idea when they show up, and that's about it. Right? And forget about experimentation.
A good example in our district is you are terminated if you change jobs in the district too.
Yeah, exactly right. Termination means you change jobs because, again, we have that. We actually are trying to get rid of old accounts because we've actually got too many accounts for some of our services. And I just had to stop my interns from deleting accounts because we accidentally deleted a few of people who still work there. And these were lists that we got from HR saying these people don't work here. So we've got a problem there. And one of our biggest problems is this last one. We can't try new ideas to see would this idea work better? Would this idea work better? I can't do that. So this is a process I'm going to take because I know every single one of you has got a process like this, and we'll walk through these ideas. So this is going to be my straw horse, right? Okay. The other thing about the onboarding process is if you have a really good onboarding process, I'll give you one example of one, the employees get really excited about your company. If you have a bad one, they wondered why they got hired by this bunch of idiots, right? That's the two extremes, okay? So the first way, systems thinking, this is Gene Kim's own little diagram. So you can think, again, your little silo, or you can think about the big thing, the big picture. What is that process for? In HR right now, the process for bringing on a new employee is I have to get them a paycheck, therefore I just have to enter the data in right before I pay them. That's locally optimized. It makes a lot of sense from the payroll perspective. No sense at all from the North Shore organization perspective. But they've got no impetus to change right now. So that causes us a problem. So the way you do this is you focus on, again, what they call a business value stream, or what is the entire process. You try to get somebody to take that entire process. You try to sit there and say, okay, let's grab all the people who are involved in it. Let's get them in the same room. Let's try to do this without blaming anybody. Be very careful in your language. You're not going to say, HR did this. You're going to say, hey, this process in HR, could we improve it at all to help the process in IT? You don't want to say people's groups, even though I've been doing that for a while, but you really don't want to do that. If you say process in this group or something, it'll really help reduce the tension. And the goal is you want to increase the flow. You want to increase the speed of things going through the system. You want to get rid of all that waste that happens, because it will happen, and you'll see it in there. So going back at North Shore, so I'm working with Megan right now in HR, and we're trying to consider the whole entire process end to end. So I started this about 2 months ago, and I thought, oh, this should be pretty easy. She makes a few changes, I make a few changes, right? The more I dig into it, oh yeah, but there's this other group that uses this little bit over here, and there's this other group that does this little bit. It's just becoming a huge rat's nest. I figure what I thought, and I actually told my manager, this won't take much of my time. It's going to eat up a good chunk of my time over the next 6 months. So, but we are making progress. We did do this. We got all the stakeholders into one room. That was kind of cool. And we got some agreement on some of our process goals and what we're trying to do. So we're making progress. I'm real happy. She's real happy. Some of the problems we have right now is the way it works now is the administrator decides, I'm going to hire this teacher. They enter a form into HR. HR goes through a bunch of internal processing, background checks and stuff. And then they send an email to the administrator saying you can hire him. So then the administrator goes fill out another form for all their IT accounts. I already got the data, but she's got to fill out the form the second time. And then they may get the right IT accounts. A lot of times they don't. There's a lot of typo errors going on in there. What else do we have? We also have many issues with new hires not knowing how to get access to their systems. However, this year, for the first time, we actually have control over what we call our STSs, school technical support people. They were always underneath the control of the principals, which meant that they were non-technical. Now they're underneath the control of IT, so we can actually train them so they can actually help users with technical problems, which is a really novel concept for North Shore. It's pretty cool. Let's see here, last item. Yeah, so now we've got this group that's working to get rid of this waste, and we're going to try to make it so they only have to enter the data once into the system. So the IT person, the HR person is making little changes to her form, so I can then take the output of that, directly create the ticket to have a new asset assigned and everything, and the new account created. And eventually, I'd like to make it like my students, where I'm not even involved in creating that account. HR does it, boom, the account gets created, right? That would be ideal. We aren't there yet, but that's what we're aiming with. With the students, everything comes out of student records, the account gets created, I'm not even involved. It's all automated. That's what we want this to turn out to be. Okay, feedback loops. Got to have these feedback loops that say, hey, is this working or not? Right? So employee onboarding. I'm getting HR to provide us with some definitions on when job is opened up. Ideally, I'd like to know when it's opened up. I'd like to set up better feedback loops for between us. Like, we'd like to know, hey, we know we're going to hire these people. Therefore, IT needs to start getting the machines ready now so that we have them ready right when the people show up. Rather than us having to run around, there's been times where like help desk runs around and actually has to grab spare machines because we didn't realize that we were going to get 20 new people show up on the same day, right? We've also started meeting with HR more often to help create those feedback loops. You'll see a lot more surveys. And definitely encourage us by not blaming the messengers. You blame the process, or you blame the problem, or whatever's happening. That's the enemy, not the messenger. And finally, this idea of culture that creates a bunch of learning and continually experimentation. This is one that I really want to stress, because the idea of repetition, you're going to get better at something the more you do it. So let's suppose you've got a data center and you want to practice a data center failure. Well, how many people actually practice that? Anybody?
Well, like, practice or like? Yeah.
Well, I actually had 4 chances in the last year to practice it. Not on purpose, but I know that by the time it happened the 4th time, I got to be pretty good at it. You know, John and I could actually restore our data center, and we felt comfortable, we felt confident because we knew what to do. The first time was a little bit nerve-wracking because we weren't sure what was going to go on. So this concept of experimentation, it gets you better at something. Plus, you're going to find better ways of doing it, right? And you'll find every time something goes wrong, you'll find another way. Like the last time that our data center crashed, we realized that we didn't have any clue about our DNS tables because they were on the machines that crashed. So now those zones are dumped nightly and stuck up in Google and stuck into our Git repository. So if DNS crashes, I still know all my IPs of where everything is. I can get to them, right?
Or when your wiki server dies with all your documentation.
Yeah. Nope, it's not going to happen to us anymore. We got burned, yes. So really, that's how you master something, is by practice, right? So this idea of continually learning is really, really important. And measurement is a key portion of that. Are you learning the right things? You take measurements. Are you getting better? Right? The last thing I'm going to mention, has anybody ever heard of the concept of mindset? Oh my goodness, okay. That's pretty cool, actually. Okay. Mindset is something that a psychologist at Stanford came up with this concept. And it's basically semi-hardwired into people. You can change your mindset, but it's hard. System admins almost always have a growth mindset because we like to twiddle with things. We like to break things. We like to fix them. We like to go off and find out what makes them work. But a lot of people don't, and you have to understand that. My son, for example, is a fixed mindset up the kazoo, and it drives me up the wall. A fixed mindset means I can't change. It means that change is an opportunity for me to fail. And that's how they view the world. So if you happen to run into a person that's a fixed mindset, you have to kind of change how you interact with them a little bit. Because for them, change and continuous experimentation and things like that is just the most scariest thing in the world for them to do. It is incredibly hard for them to do. The amount of emotional energy they spend trying to do something like that, example, my son, he needs to find a new job, and just the concept of even looking for a new job and possibly getting turned down, which means it's going to be the end of the world for him, it's really pulling teeth for him to do that. Me, I go out and get a new job. You just go out and start talking to people, right? And his mom is the same way. And we're both tussling with that, realizing, okay, this guy's a little bit different. We have to accept that. We're trying to encourage him to change. But I strongly encourage you, I have references at the end. Go read her book. Go look at her set, Mindset Online. It just really changes how you approach things. Yeah.
We're focusing in the classroom on teaching kids growth mindset. And the key for me was, he's like, I can't do it. No, I can't do it yet. Just adding the word yet changes the whole thing around. It's just like, it's not the end. This is just.
It's not the end if you can't do it now. You're right.
Yet, but it's you immediately know if you get someone with a fixed mindset though. It's like, okay, we got work to do.
Yeah. And personally, I feel sorry for those people because they're missing out a lot of life because they're so afraid to do anything at all. But think about that when you're dealing with like somebody in HR department or somebody in the accounting department. They may have a fixed mindset, and for them to do a change is a lot of energy and really, really, really scary. So if you want them to make that change, you have to figure out some way to make the scariness of the change be less than whatever benefits you can offer them, right? Okay, employee onboarding. We don't do much experimentation. I'm really trying to get past that. I'd love to do some A/B testing. You know, what would work better, what wouldn't work. We've been running into roadblocks. Some of them we have to wait till the people retire. Other ones, we work our way around them. But it's definitely been a problem that we've been dealing with for a long time. So this is NSD as an example of an organization that's attempting to change their employee onboarding to a little bit better situation. Now I'm going to tell you about an organization that I was an IT director for that we had the ideal employee onboarding process. It was just gorgeous. And the reason it was, I know it was like that because I had more than one new employee come back to me and say, I've just been assimilated into the Borg. They were really drop dead impressed by our employee onboarding process. And it started from the time that the minute a manager got a job opening, IT knew about it. The minute that job was even open, before they were hired, before they even advertising, IT was on that list. So I knew, and I could say, oh, I've got 4 new developers coming in over the next 2 months. All right, that was the first thing. So I knew exactly what was going on. The hiring manager knew enough that if they wanted their employee to be really, really happy and productive, they needed to come down to IT and say, this is what I want for them. We were a small development company, and a lot of the employees had kind of weird custom requirements for whatever they wanted to do to development. So when the hiring manager would pick an employee, a new employee, they say, I want that person, and they agree to it. The next step was to find out exactly what type. We didn't really have much by way of standards. You know, if they wanted a certain type of laptop or a certain type of equipment, we would get it for them because we were paying them to be productive and write code. So we were told that, again, before they even started. So I could get all this stuff ready before they even showed up. The day before they showed up, we had an IT staff person would go out to their work area, make sure everything was set up and working, put flowers there, put a little care basket there. When that person came in the front door, they knew that they wanted to stay in our company. They were welcome there. It felt like home. After they started, their first day of starting, they would meet with HR, fill out all their paperwork. Then they would go meet with the hiring manager, talk to them about their jobs and stuff like that. Then they would show up, and when they left, and actually what happened is when the hiring manager was done with them, he'd call one of the IT employees who would then take them from the hiring manager's office down to their workstation, show them all the services, make sure they got onto their email, make sure that they had access to everything they wanted, answered any question they had, and took care of it. All right? And it typically took about an hour to do all that. And then the IT person would check back with email via the next day and typically during the next week too. Hey, do you have any more questions? Do you have any problems? Is there anything stopping you from doing your work? And if there was one, we would try to fix it. Now, I could do this at a small company. This doesn't scale very well, you can guess. But there are aspects of it I should be able to scale. I should know that we're going to be bringing in 20 new teachers on this day. And I should be able to have 20 laptops lined up, ready for them. Right? I don't have that information now, but I would love to have that. It wouldn't cost a whole lot for my IT department to sit there and buy a little care package of something that includes information about how to get help and other things, and we give to them. And all of a sudden, that teacher is going to have a whole different view of IT when they come in, rather than, oh, yeah, here's a laptop, bye. Right? And finally, feedback loop part. The IT person would ask this person if the new employee had any concerns or something wasn't working right. That gave us feedback. That's what we needed to improve for the next employee. So we had a continuous feedback loop. And every employee, we got a little bit better at doing this. Until finally, toward the end of my time there, this is what a lot of the new employees would come in. They felt so welcome there that they've just been assimilated into our culture and everything within the first day or two. It's a really great place to work. Okay, some other ideas? Wouldn't it be cool that if every time a new hire event happens, you get a new purchase request for that computer shows up? I mean, you can order laptops now and they'll show up within a week. Why are we sitting here buying a whole bunch of laptops or a whole bunch of computers and storing them in a warehouse somewhere until somebody needs them? What I want to do is I want to have it HR opens up a new purchase request. I've got standardization. Bingo, that also triggers, HR opens up a new employee request. That triggers a new purchase request. Boom, it appears on my thing. It appears in my IT department, ready to go. All right? How many people here use F5? Okay. They have one of the most incredible support systems in place. Their boxes are very simple, but they also have a really cool thing. I can take a dump from my F5 box and I push it up to their site called iHealth, and it tells me everything that's going wrong and everything that's going right. And it's all automated. It's like an automated tech support person for me. It tells me what upgrades I can do, which ones I should do. And in fact, what happens is whenever you call for support, that's the first thing they tell you to do, because then they can emulate your box. They don't have to get on your production box. They can run a version of it on their iHealth site and see, oh yeah, you're right, that's not working. Or here's what you need to do to make it work. It's really, really slick. And they have a really good escalation. If something goes wrong, boom, it gets escalated up really rapidly. Now contrast that to VMware of about 6 years ago. I was trying to get a new VMware license, could not do it. Escalation was totally, utterly broken. I ended up talking to their VP of support before I finally got help. That's a broken system. VMware's fixed that by now. Anybody else have any other ideas for applying these 3 principles? System thinking, feedback loops, experimentation?
Scheduling. If you want feedback, go ask.
Mm-hmm.
Schedule it.
And unfortunately, you have to do more than send out an email. Or even on surveys, you'll be lucky to get 5 or 6%. But if you go out in person or do a phone call, then you'll get feedback. So that's definitely a better way of doing it.
We
Yeah.
recently kind of went through this with our professional development department, where I got some work in to do some automation and needed to for our SharePoint, and I captured all these new attributes in our data warehouse, and so I had this new data we could operate on, and then PD came in and said, hey, we need to fix the way we're assigning training, and I went to him and said, hey, instead of just fixing what we had, I have all this new data. Can we work together and figure out a way? I think it could really help you. And it spawned a new relationship with them, with a vendor, and then we were able to automate directed training by your job code.
Oh, cool.
And that really built a good relationship with them, with the PD department, which we previously not had. Just by thinking openly about how we can apply what we already had, and then trying to get them to also, think outside the box of what they already had.
Mm-hmm.
So now we work together really well.
Yeah, and that's great. That's another thing, just as a little sideline. You may have heard me talk here about doing backups before. So if you're at a company or an organization, figure out what some of the pain points are. Every manager's got pain points, guaranteed. Go ask them, find out what are some of your pain points. If you get lucky, one of them will be something that you can fix very easily. The example I often give was when I started at North Shore 13, 14 years ago, the pain point was we had a lot of old Macintoshes that were failing all the time. So they would fail, the teacher would come into support, and the support would say, I can't help you, here's a new Mac, you've lost everything. And literally, we were having teachers coming in and they were crying because they just lost all their grades or all their lesson plans or whatever, and we're toast. Well, when I heard about this pain point, I said, I can fix that. And I put in an open source system that did all the backups. And the first day after that system was in place for about a week, teacher came in crying, brought in the laptop, and the support people were so happy because the help desk said, give me 10 minutes. Walked around the corner, downloaded the latest backup to another laptop, walked out to the teacher and said, hey, here you go. Is 2 days pass okay? Teacher went back really happy. All of a sudden, we were getting cakes, candy, cookies, flowers, and in general, the attitude toward IT within the entire district went up several notches because we had gotten rid of something that had been hurting the entire district. So look for those little pain points. You can often really make hay off of those. And it will, like you say, really encourage people to be working with you better. So the next major principle is what they call the small batches. So the concept here is that if you do an incremental change, it's a lot better than doing a big change. And it's a lot better for many reasons. One is you're going to get feedback a lot sooner, and you're not going to sit there and put a bunch of bad stuff. You're not going to spend a lot of energy wasted on doing something that nobody wants, right? Your developers or you may think, hey, this is a really cool feature. I'm going to put it in here. And then you're going to find out that nobody likes it. Nobody wants it. It's worthless. Or they don't use it. Well, that's wasted energy, right? Let's suppose you're doing a project and it gets canceled partway through. If you do a bunch of little incremental changes, at least you'll have something you can use. If you try to do one big thing, it gets canceled, you throw out everything, right? You have a lot more opportunities for learning, for training, for figuring out how to deploy things, for figuring out how to update things. If you do a bunch of little incremental changes, you're doing a lot of little updates. And after doing 4 or 5 of them, you'll get really confident about doing updates. So I have an application. It's our mail filter. I love it because updates are really simple. They have it down pat. I feel confident about it. When I update our mail server, I'm not nearly as confident. Updates there are a lot more work. They're typically much larger. It reduces risk. Again, if you're doing this, you're just accepting a little bit of risk. If I do the whole thing all at once, I'm accepting a big chunk of risk. Is it what I really need? Is it what my users want? Does it do what I need? So the major companies take this absolutely to the extreme. Like I say, GitHub pushes out multiple updates a day. Facebook is typically once a day. Google, sometimes multiple times a day. I think that's about all I have to say on that. But little small changes, as much as you can do that. You can't always do that, but if you can, a lot of times, like, you might have a system and the company only releases one change a year. You're kind of stuck there. But if you can, look for companies that don't do that. Look for, if you have a choice between 2 companies and one says, yeah, I'll offer you updates every month. What I have found, companies that host their own products are more likely to have a lot of small incremental changes, where companies that don't host their products are more likely to have one big yearly change or something. So a lot of times, even though I like on-prem products, I buy an on-prem product that is also hosted by the company, because they're making a lot of incremental changes and they have that whole process built into their software development cycle, and that makes it easier for me too, right?
A big part of this for me is being able to, we try and do this, not days, but my first question is, okay, what happens if it fails? Having a fail over, so that if something does go wrong, cleanly revert back.
And again, it's a lot easier to fail back from a small change than a big change, right?
Yeah.
So small batches is one of the key ideas. Yeah.
I'm a developer, and
Okay.
back in the day, I came from an agile development environment.
Great.
And I like that. That's how I'm used to it. But in the school district, you have an issue of teachers who fear change.
Oh yeah.
And having to train them on any change. How do you?
That's hard. So for example, at North Shore, we had this great idea. We were going to say, okay, we are going to take down the system. We want 2 days a month to take down our systems. And we thought, great. Instead of crashing or having a couple days a year to do all our work, we're going to try to spread it out a whole year, 2 days a month. Unfortunately, by the time that got through all the bureaucracy, it got perverted to 2 days a month, and you can only take down exactly one system, and you have to be perfect. And it doesn't really help us out a whole lot. It's hard. It really is. What we've kind of done is we've interpreted that command from on high for, well, system in that mode means user-facing changes. So non-user-facing changes, yeah, we can do behind the scenes, and if I do them late at night or early in the morning, I've found out that our superintendent likes to work late at night, so I'm typically doing them early in the morning, so she doesn't notice them. But things like that, right? But it is really hard, and this is where the whole culture of DevOps come in. If you can get people to kind of understand that small changes are a lot less risk, and that's how you sell it. Hey, if you allow me to do some small ones, you're less likely to have everything crash. Okay, so I did a mail server upgrade recently. Upgrade not only the mail server, but new OS and version. So the first thing I did is I created a couple new mail servers, brand new ones with a new OS and new version. Then I moved over a few mailboxes and we tested them. Oh, well, that worked. We moved over a few more. Well, this part didn't work, that part didn't work, but we worked out the bugs. And we moved over a few more. So I'm making a lot of little small batches. Each time I do, I check it out, right? And then finally, when I'm pretty confident, then I start automating the process. The first ones were all done by hand, but now I'm starting to automate the process. Let's do 50 at once. Okay, that's working. Let's do this school at once. So we gradually work our way through it. That's an example of it. This is one that I really, really like. Fred Hutch is an organization in Seattle that does medical research. All their money comes from prime investigators who bring the money with them. I.e., if this person doesn't like Fred Hutch, they go and they take all their money with them. You're talking millions of dollars. So Fred Hutch's IT department is really picky about being the best IT department. One of the problems they have is how do we make sure that our systems are always up for these prime investigators, i.e., they never go down. The way they do that is typically it's the Thursday of every month, they have the entire IST staff comes and gets there. They all get on a chat thing. I think they're using Slack now. They used to use IRC. And somebody goes out and pulls a cable. What happens if I pull this one? Oops, something broke. Let's go plug it back in. Let's write up documentation. Let's figure out why that caused the entire data center to fail. And then let's put it all back together and we'll make sure it never happens again. And some of the examples they found was, oh, it was really easy for people to plug in dual power supplies into the same power strip. You know, tight quarters and stuff. So what they did is they color-coded. They actually literally put tape on all their power strips, red and blue. And then you have red and blue ends on top of your power cords. And you're guaranteed. And so simple things like that, right? To sit there and get rid of things. But every month, they're out there trying to figure out how to break their systems. And they've worked out a deal with the PI saying, hey, we're going to do this. You may lose a little bit of system time on this one night, but because you do this, we'll guarantee that you won't ever have a major outage. And they've been able to do that. They're the only company I know that does that besides like Google and some other ones that do it really big. But the benefits are this trains a new staff. I'm a new staff member at Fred Hutch. Within the first few months, I've been all over the place pulling cables, seeing what happens, trying things out, right? I'm getting out there, I'm doing things, right? And then when something breaks, I get to go look at their playbook. How do I fix it? Well, oops, you're missing an instruction right here. I followed the playbook, but it didn't work. Yeah, I forgot to put in that one instruction, right? So I'm testing my documentation all the time, right? Okay. Anybody know who this is? No, okay. So this is Kripa. Kripa Krishnan, and she is the leader of the Google DIRT team. This is what Fred Hutch does, but on a large scale. This is one reason why I actually like my data up in Google. The DIRT stands for Disaster Incident Recovery Team. It's a group of several hundred people. Their whole goal is to simulate things going wrong inside the Google's network. And when I say simulate, I mean really simulate. Like, there's an article, I have it in my references at the end, and they actually go out there and they will take down a data center. And if it's more than 2 or 3% of their population users are affected, they bring it right back up and they say, we have something wrong. Google feels like they can lose any data center or any multiple group of data centers and still be okay. And they not only simulate their technical things, they simulate their HR processes. Oh, what would happen if something went really wrong and my HR people are scattered all around the world and I have to bring them home? Can HR handle that? Buying a whole bunch of plane tickets all of a sudden, figuring out a way to get them home? Again, lots and lots of repetition here. Small batches, they're trying things out, a little bit larger scale than what we're used to. So I guess what I'm trying to say is in your own group, if you can, maybe talk to your management and say, hey, I'd like to simulate or at least test my documentation here. If something happens, if something breaks.
I was reading an article about another company. It's a tech company. I think it's like Netflix or something. They wrote a program.
Oh yeah, Chaos Monkey.
Chaos Monkey. They randomly shut down services.
Yeah, so Netflix, you know Netflix. Most of their infrastructure runs on top of Amazon. But Netflix has something called Chaos Monkey that is a program that randomly wipes out parts of their infrastructure. I mean, it randomly just turns off large chunks of their machines in Amazon on purpose. So when Amazon went down on the East Coast, Netflix was not affected. They had already tested it. They had already said, yeah, we've tested that, we can survive. And they were literally not affected. Everybody else was. Chaos Monkey is free if you want to buy it. You can run it on your network and have it start shutting down machines. I don't think it might be a good idea. But
It's called intern.
Okay, so a few other things about small batches. You upgrade workstations a few at a time. I'm sure most people do this, right? You don't take a workstation update and shove it out to all of them, right? You kind of test it a little bit and work it out, right? That's small batches. Installing software, right? So those are some other examples. I think I'm just about done here. The last thing is minimum viable product. This is a concept of I do just enough to get something out the door, and then I start immediately getting user feedback. Google does this incredible. Like, has anybody tried Google Team Drives yet? Yeah. Have you noticed that it's rather limited? You can't do hardly anything with it. It allows you to open up a Team Drive, but that's it. The admin console is worthless. Google's following this. And they're getting a heck of a lot of feedback, including from me and lots of people I know, saying, hey, this is a piece of crap. Your admin console's crap. This is why. Their next version is probably going to fix a lot of those things because now they know what we want and what we don't want. That's what Google's doing exactly on this. Asana does the same thing. Lots of the internet companies now do this. Put out just the bare minimum to get you interested, and then they wait and see what you complain about and what you like and what you don't like, and then that's the part they work on next.
Or if you're really interested. Find out if you're really interested. Or find out if you really are interested.
Yeah. Oh, you're exactly right. And the idea is you get the feedback sooner. You can help people sooner. You get one feature out now, and then you gradually add in the others. And then if people don't like it, you can change direction. Like if Google had put out Team Drive and everybody hated it, you can better be sure it's going to disappear real quick, right? Because they're going to say, why waste money on something that people don't want? Finally, happier users, you get along like this thing, you got a bunch of happy users that really like it, they're going to start to advocate for you. So one of the things at North Shore is we would rather not do workstation backups now. It's actually kind of time consuming. But we have a lot of users that really advocate for it, including our own help desk. They like the ability to restore things for people. We are now stuck with that. That was a side effect that nobody thought about 13 years ago when I implemented the system. So now it costs us, we have an intern, I think, Steve Zane, and he spends, about 4 to 8 hours a week kind of managing the system, figuring out why some laptop didn't back up. I got 1,500, 1,600 laptops I'm doing on this thing. And we just have to eat that. We can't change that. The users really like it. Another example on this one is collegescorecard.com. If anybody has any high school kids, they're going to be going to collegescorecard.com, .ed.gov, I'm sorry. It's a little thing that the government threw up. A guy named Mickey, can't remember his last name, but he's the guy in the government. They hired him. He's the SRE out of Google. And some really sharp government employees built the first version, and nobody was using it. I mean, they did a traditional thing. They spent a lot of money. They built this thing. Absolutely no kid in the U.S. was actually, I think they had 50,000 hits, some incredibly low number. So Mickey comes on board. He says, why is this? So what does he do? What do you think he did?
Went out and asked them?
Huh?
Went out and asked them?
That's right. He took his entire freaking development team, all 6 of them, wandered down to the local high school in Washington, D.C. and said, why do you use it? And the kid said, I can't get to it on my cell phone. The whole thing had no cell phone interface. And do you know a kid today that actually uses a laptop? They all use their cell phone. So he went back, his team, and rather than spending a lot of time making a cell phone interface, what did they do? They made a bunch of storyboards. They got a bunch of cardboard. Hey, this is what we think the cell phone interface should look like. Went back down to the kids. What do you think? got a whole bunch of feedback. Then they finally changed the application. When the new application went live, they have well over 1 million hits per day. All of a sudden, all the kids can use it, including mine. It's great. It's a great app for them. It gives you all the information you know about this school versus that school. It's great. All because the guy took time to go down and ask. And then he used the principles of DevOps, small batches, let's make little changes, let's find out, let's get those feedback loops going. Monitoring system. We're putting in a new monitoring system. Now, I've done this several times over the years, and I have done it wrong most of the time, in that I spend a lot of time building it all out. This time we're going to do it different. This time I'm going to put this thing up, and the first thing we're going to monitor is up, down on our websites. Nothing else. I want that, and I want alerts. That's it. My vendor I'm working with is having a little bit of a hard time understanding that. I don't want anything else. I want that minimum viable product that I can work on. Once I get that part down and I'm happy with it, and the rest of my team is happy, then we're going to say, what else do we want? And we'll add in one more thing. And we're going to use this whole concept of minimum viable product. And by the time this thing gets done in 6 or 7 months, it'll be something we really, really want and use. Rather than having that vendor go off and put it all together and we say, well, I'm not sure that's what I really wanted. And I mean, it's not the vendor's problem. It's the process between me and the vendor, right? You know, I try to tell him. He interprets that in a way that I don't expect him to interpret it. And we need the back and forth. We have to have that. And him and I have been working on building that up. Okay. OS install automation. Asana is another one that uses minimum viable product a lot. They have what they call a beta area. They're a project management tool you can go online that we use. But they have a beta area, and they'll throw things up in their beta area, and people really like it, and a lot of people use it. Then it moves into the product. If people don't like it, it'll disappear out of the product, which is really bad if they happen to like a beta and nobody else does, as I found out. Okay. So the 3 ways, which is system thinking, feedback loops, the culture of continuous experimentation. So this one, you have to make sure that find a friend in that other department that you're trying to work with. Find something, find that low-hanging fruit that you can sit there and solve one of their pain points. If you solve one of their pain points, they're more likely to start working with you. And then you can start to optimize across both departments, rather than just for your own department. You can work on those feedback loops. Start meeting with them. Say hi to them. Things like that. Bring them cookies or something, for crying out loud. Anything to get them to want to start paying attention to you a little bit. And then if you're lucky enough, you can do the experimentation. That part I find really hard in a school district because they're so resistant to change. Small batches we can do. Not all the time, but there are certain products that you can look at, you can buy and say, you can ask the vendor, do you produce little small incremental changes that I can apply? Look for vendors that both host their products and sell them in on-prem. The one downside about hosted products is you don't get your choice of when you're going to apply the updates, right? If Google makes changes, you're stuck with them. They might give you some warning, but they're coming and you don't have any choice, right? With an on-prem product, I can actually control that a lot more. And then finally, the minimum viable product. Take something you're going to implement, like a new monitoring system, or even any system you can think of. SCCM, for example. You're going to go sit there and manage all your PCs. Just take a little bit of it. Get that implemented. Get that working. Then go on to the next bit. Don't try to do the whole thing all at once. Don't go out and hire somebody, or if you do hire somebody, let them know that that's how you want it done. Don't sit there and say, hey, don't hire somebody and they come back 6 months later, here you go. That's not going to work. Okay, references. This is the one about the Google Dirt stuff. This is the one where you'll see the books about the Phoenix project, stuff like that. But these slides should be online here pretty soon, or you can come and grab me about them. I basically learned about a lot of stuff from Tom Limoncelli, who writes some of these books on there. He gave a talk at Lisa last year that I went to that was really good, and he was talking about these same ideas, so I figured, hey, this might be worthwhile to us too.
Yeah, he's got a good list too. What's the list he made? We went through a bunch of it. I'm blanking on the name, but I know that
Oh, Tom Limoncelli?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. So any questions? Okay. Have a good time.
In the rain.
I'm going to have to do this.